A CEO's little girl ran to a janitor in the middle of the night, screaming words that would shatter everything. "They beat my mom. She's dying." The stairwell is concrete and cold. Emergency lights flicker yellow against gray walls. Blood pools dark beneath a woman in a business suit, her briefcase spilled open, papers scattered like leaves. She's not moving. Two men in ski masks crouch over her body, their voices sharp and low, arguing about whether she saw their faces before they put her down. They don't hear the footsteps. The janitor appears at the top of the landing. Navy coveralls, quiet eyes. He should be calling 911. He should be running. He should be doing anything except walking toward two armed men who just beat a woman unconscious. But he doesn't stop. The first attacker doesn't even see it coming. 8 seconds. And that's all it takes. One moment he's standing, the next he's on the ground, out cold, dropped by a rear naked choke so clean it looks like choreography. The second man spins, pulls a knife, and lunges. The janitor moves like water. Disarm, pin, control. One knee on the attacker's spine, one hand stabilizing the woman's fractured skull. The man underneath him is screaming threats. The janitor's voice is calm, professional, almost gentle. "Stop moving, or I'll put you to sleep like your friend." Sirens wail in the distance. The little girl's voice echoes from somewhere above, cracked and desperate. "Is my mom going to die?" The janitor doesn't look up. His hands are steady. His breathing is controlled. And if you were watching closely, if you knew what to look for, you'd see something that doesn't add up. No hesitation, no panic, a no wasted movement. This man has done this before. If you believe that the people we overlook are sometimes the ones with the most to give, stay with this story. Because what happens next will break your heart and restore your faith in one breath. Before we begin, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments, have you ever misjudged someone based on their job? But to understand how a janitor ended up fighting off armed attackers in a corporate stairwell, we need to go back 3 weeks. To the morning, a quiet man with a mop became invisible. The janitor arrived at 4:30 in the morning, when Chicago was still dark and the tower was empty. Daniel Cross pushed his cleaning cart through the marble lobby of Ashford Global Consulting, his footsteps echoing softly in the silence. The building rose 42 stories above the loop, had all glass and steel and polished surfaces. He'd worked here for 6 years. Most people who passed him in the hallways couldn't have picked him out of a lineup. That was how he liked it. He took the service elevator to the executive floors. The doors opened onto corridors lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. Beyond the glass, the frozen city stretched out in grids of light. Daniel didn't pause to look. He had 12 floors to clean before the consultants arrived at 8. He worked with quiet efficiency. Vacuum the carpets, empty the trash bins, wipe down the glass conference tables, restock the break room. His movements were precise, economical. No wasted motion, no conversation with the night security guards beyond a polite nod. At 6:15, he took his lunch break in the loading dock. A thermos of coffee, a sandwich Maya had helped him pack the night before. He ate alone, sitting on a concrete ledge, watching the delivery trucks come and go. The security guard on duty that morning was named Rick. They'd worked the same shift for 3 years. Rick didn't know Daniel's last name. By 6:45, Daniel was back upstairs. The sun was rising now, pale winter light spilling across the marble. He mopped the executive lobby. Long, steady strokes. The floor gleamed behind him. His daughter arrived at 3:30 that afternoon. Maya came straight from school, her backpack bouncing against her small frame as she pushed through the service entrance. She knew the route by heart. Down the back hallway, past the maintenance closets, into the cramped office her dad shared with the day shift custodian. "Hi, Dad," she said, dropping her bag on the floor, and Daniel looked up from his desk. He'd been filling out cleaning supply requisitions. His face softened. "Hey, sweetheart, how was school?" "Good. We had a spelling test." She pulled out her homework and sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by shelves of industrial cleaner and boxes of trash bags. "I got 100%. That's my girl." She opened her vocabulary workbook. 5 minutes passed in comfortable silence. Then she looked up. "Dad, what does mediocre mean?" "Average. Not good, not bad. Just ordinary." "Oh." She wrote it down carefully. "You use big words sometimes. How come you know all this stuff if you're just a janitor?" Daniel set down his pen. He chose his words carefully. "Reading, mostly. I like books." "But you could have been something else, right? Like a teacher or something?" "Maybe. But this job works for us. And I'm home when you need me." Maya nodded, satisfied. She returned to her homework. Daniel watched her for a moment. Dark, curly hair pulled back in braids, her mother's eyes, her mother's stubborn focus when she concentrated. He turned back to his requisition forms. Their apartment was small, 2 bedrooms in a building on the south side, 40 minutes by bus from the tower. The walls were thin. The heating rattled. But it was warm, and it was theirs. That evening, Maya sat at the kitchen table doing math problems while Daniel made dinner. Spaghetti, garlic bread, simple, filling. She watched him move around the small kitchen. Something about the way he worked caught her attention. He never bumped into anything, never fumbled. His hands were always sure. "Dad?" "Yeah? How come you don't like loud noises?" He paused, eyed the wooden spoon halfway to the pot. "What do you mean?" "Like at the 4th of July. You didn't want to watch the fireworks. And when that car backfired last week, you jumped." Daniel stirred the sauce slowly. "I don't know, sweetheart. Some people just don't like loud sounds. And you always look at the doors when we go into places, like you're checking where they are." He glanced at her. Her small face was serious, curious. "That's just habit." "From what?" "From being careful." She accepted this, though her eyes lingered on him a little longer than usual. After dinner, they watched a nature documentary. Maya curled against his side on the couch, her head on his shoulder. The narrator talked about wolves, pack behavior, survival instincts. During a commercial break, Maya shifted. "Dad, what was Mom like?" The question landed like a weight. Daniel's jaw tightened. He kept his eyes on the television. "She was brave," he said quietly. "The bravest person I ever knew." "Did she look like me?" "A little. You have her eyes. Do you miss her?" His throat closed. He nodded once. Maya reached up and patted his arm, the way she'd seen other people comfort each other. "It's okay to be sad," she said. Daniel pulled her closer. His daughter, 7 years old, too wise for her age. "I know, sweetheart." They sat in silence until the documentary came back on. Later that night, after Maya had gone to bed, Daniel stood in his small bedroom. The apartment was quiet. Just the hum of the radiator and the distant sound of traffic. He knelt beside the bed, reached underneath. His hand found the locked box he kept there. He didn't open it. He just rested his palm on the cold metal surface. Inside were things he hadn't looked at in years. Medals, photos, a folded flag. Evidence of a life he'd walked away from. A life that had cost him everything. He left the box where it was, stood, looked at the photo on his dresser. Maya, age 4, gap-toothed and grinning at the camera. That was what mattered now. Not what he'd been, not what he'd lost. Just her. He turned off the light and tried to sleep, knowing the dreams would come anyway. The conference room on the 40th floor was all glass and sharp angles. Christine Harlow stood at the head of the table, her tailored suit perfectly pressed, her posture rigid with authority. 6 executives sat around her, laptops open, notepads ready. In the corner, on a leather chair by the window, her daughter Sophie sat with her knees pulled up, headphones on, doing homework. The nanny had canceled 2 hours before the meeting. Christine had no choice but to bring her. "Let's begin," Christine said. Her voice was clipped, efficient. "Johnson, your Q4 projections." A man in his 50s fumbled with his tablet. He started to speak. Christine cut him off. "Those numbers are unacceptable. We discussed margin targets last week. This doesn't meet them." "I understand. But the market conditions—" "I don't need excuses. I need results." Johnson's face flushed. He nodded, silent. Christine moved to the next person. "Patterson? Client retention?" The woman across the table hesitated before answering. Christine's eyes narrowed. "Speak up. We don't have all night." Patterson cleared her throat and presented her slides. But Christine interrupted twice, pointing out minor errors in formatting, questioning assumptions, demanding revisions by morning. The room was tense. No one made eye contact with anyone else. Sophie glanced up from her math worksheet. She watched her mother pace at the front of the room, watched the way the other adults seemed to shrink when Christine spoke to them. She'd seen this before. She always saw it. She returned to her homework, trying to be smaller. Christine was the only woman at this level of leadership in the firm. She'd clawed her way up from a state school MBA. No connections, no safety net. Every day she proved she belonged here. Every day she reminded people she wasn't going anywhere. Every challenge felt personal. Every mistake felt like an attack. "That's all," she said. 40 minutes later, 2 revised reports on my desk by 8 a.m. No exceptions. The executives filed out quickly, grateful to escape. Christine gathered her materials. She didn't look at Sophie. "Come on, we're leaving." Sophie packed her backpack in silence. She followed her mother out of the conference room, down the hallway, toward the elevators. Her expensive shoes clicked softly on the marble. Her coat was designer, uncomfortable around the shoulders. "Mom?" Christine was scrolling through her phone, already responding to emails. "What? Can we get dinner together? Like, sit down somewhere?" "I have calls to make tonight. We'll pick something up." "But we haven't eaten together in like a week and—" "Sophie, not now." They reached the elevator lobby. Christine pressed the button, still staring at her screen. The elevator doors opened. A man in navy coveralls stood there with a mop and bucket, moving them out of the way. He stepped back to let them pass. Christine walked forward without looking up. She nearly collided with him. The man moved aside smoothly, silently. Christine didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge him, just stepped into the elevator and kept reading. Sophie glanced back. The janitor was watching them go. His face was kind, tired, but kind. Their eyes met for half a second. Sophie felt something she couldn't name, a flicker of recognition. Not that she knew him, but that he saw her. Really saw her. The elevator doors closed. Christine was already talking on the phone, her voice sharp and commanding as she negotiated with someone on the other end. Sophie stood beside her mother in the descending elevator, holding her backpack straps, staring at the polished metal doors. And she wondered if her mom ever got tired of being angry all the time. 2 days later, Daniel was cleaning the main lobby when the investors arrived. It was 7:15 in the evening. The marble floors gleamed under the chandeliers. Glass walls reflected the city lights outside. Daniel pushed his equipment cart toward the executive elevators, moving efficiently, staying out of the way. He didn't see them coming until it was too late. Christine Harlow swept through the lobby with 12 people in expensive suits trailing behind her. Investors, potential clients, people who mattered. Daniel's cart was blocking the elevator entrance. He'd only stopped for 10 seconds to empty a nearby trash bin, but that was all it took. He saw Christine and moved immediately, pulling the cart aside. She stopped cold. Her eyes locked on him. Then on the cart, and then on the wet floor sign he'd just placed. "Are you serious right now?" Her voice cut through the lobby like a whip. Daniel stepped back, hands at his sides. "I apologize, ma'am. I was just... Do you have any idea who these people are?" Christine's face was flushed. Her voice rose with each word. "Do you understand what this tour means?" The investors shifted uncomfortably behind her. A few exchanged glances. Daniel kept his face neutral, his voice quiet. "I'm moving it now. I apologize for the inconvenience." "Inconvenience?" Christine took a step closer. "This is beyond inconvenience. This is carelessness. This is incompetence." She turned to her assistant, a young woman in a gray suit who looked like she wanted to disappear. "Get his supervisor on the phone. I want him written up. Actually, and I want to know why someone this incapable of basic tasks even has a job here." One of the investors, an older man with silver hair, cleared his throat. "Ms. Harlow, it's really not—" "No." Christine didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on Daniel. "This is about standards. People like us expect a certain level of professionalism. That's why we pay what we pay. That's why this building operates the way it does." She gestured at Daniel like he was evidence in a trial. "If you can't move a cart without blocking executive access, maybe you're in the wrong line of work. Maybe you should be doing something that requires less thinking." The lobby had gone silent. 2 security guards near the entrance watched, but didn't move. A woman waiting for the elevator pretended to check her phone. Daniel stood perfectly still. His jaw was tight, and his hands were steady at his sides. "I apologize, ma'am. It won't happen again." His voice was barely above a whisper. Christine stared at him for 3 long seconds. Then she turned to her assistant. "Make sure his supervisor knows I called. This kind of thing is exactly why we have performance reviews." She gestured to the investors. "Let's take the west elevators. Clearly this area isn't being maintained to standard." The group followed her across the lobby. Their footsteps echoed on the marble. A few of them glanced back at Daniel. None of them said anything. Daniel waited until they were gone. Then he moved his cart down a service corridor and disappeared from view. What he didn't know was that his daughter had been sitting in the lobby seating area the entire time. Maya had been doing homework on one of the leather couches near the windows. She came here sometimes after school, waiting for her dad's shift to end so they could ride the bus home together. She'd watched the whole thing through the glass partition. She'd seen her father shrink under that woman's words. Seen him apologize for something that wasn't his fault. Seen him walk away with his head down like he'd done something wrong. Her hands were shaking when Daniel found her 20 minutes later. "Ready to go, sweetheart?" Maya looked up at him. Her eyes were wet. "Why didn't you say anything?" Daniel crouched down beside her chair. His voice was gentle. "What do you mean?" "That lady. She was so mean to you, and you just stood there." "Sometimes people get upset. It's not personal." "But you didn't do anything wrong. Your cart was only there for like 2 seconds, and she acted like you ruined her whole life." Maya's voice cracked. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Daniel reached out and squeezed her shoulder. Some fights aren't worth having, sweetheart. Words can't really hurt us. Maya stared at him. She didn't believe that. She'd just watched words cut her father down in front of a room full of strangers. She'd seen what they could do. I don't understand why you let people treat you like that. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he helped her pack up her homework. Come on, let's go home. They walked toward the exit together. Maya's backpack hung heavy on her small shoulders. She kept glancing up at her father's face, trying to understand something she was too young to name. Across the lobby, near the west elevators, and Christine stood with Sophie while the investors filed into waiting cars outside. Sophie tugged on her mother's sleeve. Mom! Christine was checking her phone, already moving on to the next thing. What? Why were you so mean to him? Christine looked down. Her daughter's face was serious, troubled. He was in my way, Sophie. I don't have time to deal with people who can't do their jobs properly. But he said sorry, and he moved the cart really fast. That's not the point. Then what is? Christine's jaw tightened. She glanced out the window at the waiting cars, at the investors who expected perfection, at the world that judged her every move. The point is that standards matter. Now come on. We have to go. She walked toward the exit without looking back. Sophie followed, silent, her small hand gripping the strap of her backpack too tight. Daniel couldn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling until 2 a.m. Maya was asleep in the next room, her breathing soft and steady through the thin wall. The radiator clanked. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance. He got up. The apartment was dark except for the light from the street filtering through the curtains. Daniel walked to the kitchen in his bare feet, the linoleum cold beneath him. He filled a glass of water, drank it, filled it again. He set the glass down and stood there, hands flat on the counter. Then he went to his bedroom and knelt beside the bed. The box was where it had always been. Metal, fireproof, locked. He hadn't opened it in 8 years. His hands found the key taped to the underside of the bed frame. The lock clicked open. Inside, and the past waited. Military medals lay wrapped in cloth, a ranger tab, dog tags on a chain. He lifted them out carefully, like they might break. Beneath them, a photograph. Daniel in desert fatigues, 20 pounds lighter, standing with his unit somewhere outside Kandahar. Young men with hard eyes and easy smiles. 3 of them were dead now. He set it aside. A wedding photo. Daniel in his dress blues, younger, laughing. The woman beside him wore firefighter dress blues, her dark hair pulled back, her smile bright enough to light the whole frame. Renee. His throat tightened. A folded letter. Department of the Army letterhead. He didn't need to open it. He'd memorized every word years ago. Notification of casualty. Home invasion. Multiple assailants. His wife. His unborn son. Both gone before he'd even boarded the transport flight home. Daniel's hands were shaking now. One more photo. Small, creased at the edges from being held too many times. Renee at 7 months pregnant, laughing at something off camera. Her hand rested on her stomach. Their son. The boy who never got a name. The memory came whether he wanted it or not. The sat phone call in the middle of the night. His commanding officer's face. The transport flight from Helmand Province. 36 hours of numb silence. Landing at Dover. The drive to Chicago. Walking into a funeral home instead of a hospital. 2 closed caskets. He'd been 8,000 miles away, keeping soldiers alive under fire, performing field surgery in the back of moving vehicles, saving strangers while his family died, screaming for help he couldn't give. His commanding officer had found him afterward, sitting alone in the parking lot. "See, stay in, Cross. Channel this. Use it. You're too good to walk away." But Daniel had looked at his hands, hands that could stop bleeding, stabilize spines, keep men breathing when their lungs were collapsing. And all he could see was Renee's face. All he could hear was what the police had told him. She fought. She tried to protect the baby. She called his name. He'd walked away 3 weeks later, turned in his resignation, packed his daughter's things, found the smallest, quietest apartment he could afford, started working nights, where violence felt impossibly far away and no one needed saving. Daniel closed his eyes. The kitchen light was too bright. He put the photos back in the box, the medals, the letter, closed the lid, locked it. He stood and walked to the refrigerator. Maya's school photo was held there with a magnet shaped like a sunflower. 7 years old. Gap-toothed smile, eyes full of trust. She was the only thing that mattered now. Not what he'd been. Not what he'd lost. Just her. His phone buzzed on the counter. Daniel picked it up. A text message from his supervisor. Timestamp. 2:47 a.m. Christine Harlow called. Formal complaint filed. You're on probation effective immediately. One more incident and you're terminated. I'm sorry, Daniel. My hands are tied. He set the phone down, stood there in the dark kitchen, surrounded by the ghosts of who he used to be, and felt the walls closing in. 3 days later, Daniel sat in the HR office on the 38th floor. The room was small, windowless, dominated by a conference table. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. His supervisor, Tom Garcia, sat to his left, fidgeting with a pen. Across the table, he and HR representative named Laura Chen reviewed documents in a manila folder. She looked up. "Mr. Cross, we've received a formal complaint from Ms. Harlow regarding the incident on Thursday evening." Daniel nodded once. He kept his hands flat on the table. "She claims you were blocking executive access during a client tour," Laura continued. "She also states that when confronted, you displayed what she characterized as a dismissive attitude." Tom shifted in his seat. He looked miserable. "Daniel's been with us for 6 years. This is the first complaint I've ever received about him." Laura's expression didn't change. "Ms. Harlow is our Chief Operating Officer. Her concerns carry significant weight." She slid a paper across the table. "This is a final written warning. Any further incident will result in immediate termination. And do you understand?" Daniel picked up the paper, read it, signed it. "Yes, ma'am." "Do you have anything you'd like to add?" "No, ma'am." Tom walked him out afterward, into the hallway where no one could hear. "I'm sorry, Daniel. My hands are tied. She called my boss. She called his boss. There's nothing I can do." Daniel met his eyes. "I understand. Just keep your head down. Stay out of her way." "I will." But staying out of Christine Harlow's way was easier said than done. That same afternoon, Christine held a budget review meeting on the 40th floor. 8 department heads sat around the conference table, laptops open, quarterly reports ready. A junior analyst named Marcus presented first. 24 years old, 3 months into the job. He walked them through his slide deck, in his voice steady until Christine stopped him on slide 7. "What's this number?" Marcus glanced at his screen. "That's the projected Q4 marketing spend. Adjusted for, it's wrong. I pulled it directly from the finance teams. I don't care where you pulled it from. It's off by $3,000. Did you even check your work?" The room went still. Marcus's face flushed red. I can pull up the source file and don't bother. If you can't deliver accurate data, you're wasting everyone's time. Christine looked at his manager. Get me someone who can count. Marcus gathered his laptop with shaking hands and left the room. Christine moved on to the next agenda item without pause. Later that evening, her assistant Rachel was packing up to leave when Christine appeared in her doorway. I need the Peterson contract redlined by tomorrow morning. Rachel's shoulders sagged. I have tickets to a show tonight. My boyfriend's birthday. Reschedule. Ms. Harlow, I haven't had an evening off in 2 weeks, and that's the job, Rachel. If you can't handle the demands, there are plenty of people who can. Christine turned and walked back to her office. Rachel sat down at her desk and texted her boyfriend that she wasn't coming. In a different meeting, Christine cut off a colleague mid-sentence when he questioned her proposed budget cuts to employee development programs. We're not a charity, David. We invest in performance, not potential. But these programs have consistently shown ROI over. The decision is made. David stopped talking. He didn't bring it up again. Sophie saw some of this. Sure, she was back in her mother's office that evening, doing homework on the couch while Christine worked late. The door was open. Sophie could hear her mother on the phone, her voice sharp and cold. I don't tolerate incompetence. If people can't keep up, they don't belong here. That's how standards work. Sophie pulled her knees up to her chest. She made herself smaller. When Christine finally hung up, Sophie didn't say anything. She just kept working on her math problems, trying to be invisible, trying to be good enough that her mother might notice her. Across the city, in a small apartment on the south side, Maya sat at the kitchen table while Daniel made dinner. She'd been quiet all evening. Too quiet. Dad? Yes, sweetheart? Are you gonna lose your job? Daniel looked over from the stove. Her face was serious, worried. No. Where'd you get that idea? I heard you on the phone. You said you got in trouble. He turned the burner down and came to sit beside her. I got a warning. That's different. I'm still working. We're okay. But what if you do lose it? Then I'll find another one. But we don't have extra money. I know we don't. Her voice cracked. I see how you count the bills. I know you skip lunch sometimes. Daniel's chest tightened. Maya, look at me. She did. Her eyes were wet. We're fine, I promise. You don't need to worry about this. But I do worry. You work so hard, and people are mean to you, and it's not fair. He pulled her into a hug. She buried her face against his shoulder. Life's not always fair, sweetheart. But we have each other. That's what matters. She nodded against him but didn't let go. The next day, Maya went to the library after school. She sat at a public computer and typed into the search bar, "How to make money as a kid." The results came back. Dog walking, lemonade stands, babysitting, yard work. She read through them carefully, taking notes in her homework planner. If her dad lost his job, she wanted to be ready to help. Back at Ashford, Sophie found her mother in her office late Friday afternoon. Christine was reviewing presentation slides, her focus absolute. Mom? Christine didn't look up. What? Can we have dinner together this weekend? Like, go somewhere? I have a board presentation to prep. But you always have presentations. Christine's jaw tightened. She set down her pen and finally looked at her daughter. Maybe next month, Sophie. This one's important. Sophie stood there for 5 long seconds. Then she nodded and walked back to the couch, curling up small in the corner, trying once again to be perfect enough to matter. 2 weeks had passed since the humiliation in the lobby. Daniel pushed his cleaning cart down the 40th floor hallway just before 11 p.m. on a Friday night. The building was nearly empty. Just a few executives burning the midnight oil, a handful of security guards downstairs, and the distant hum of the HVAC system keeping the tower breathing. He moved from office to office with practiced efficiency, emptied the trash, wiped down the glass conference tables, vacuumed the carpets. The work was methodical, predictable, safe. When he reached the executive suite, Christine Harlow's office lights were still on. He knocked lightly on the door frame. She was at her desk, surrounded by documents and presentation slides. Her daughter Sophie lay curled on the leather couch in the corner, half asleep over a math worksheet. Christine didn't look up. "Trash," Daniel said quietly. She waved him in without a word. He emptied the bin beside her desk, replaced the liner. Sophie lifted her head and gave him a small, tired wave. Daniel nodded back, a gentle acknowledgement. The girl's eyes were heavy. It was nearly 11 p.m. on a school night. Christine typed furiously on her laptop, completely absorbed. Daniel left without another word. The hallway was silent, except for the soft squeak of his cartwheels on the polished floor. He continued his rounds. North wing, west wing. Conference rooms empty and dark. The building felt almost peaceful at this hour, like the whole city was holding its breath. Back in Christine's office, Sophie tried to focus on her homework. She read the same word problem 3 times without understanding it. Her mother's fingers flew across the keyboard, the clicking relentless. "Mom!" "What?" "How much longer?" "I don't know, Sophie. I need to finish this." Sophie looked at the clock on the wall. 10:52 p.m. She pulled her jacket tighter around herself and returned to her worksheet. The numbers blurred together. Christine suddenly stood, gathering her phone and keys. "I need to get something from my car. Documents I left in my briefcase." Sophie sat up. "Can I come?" "No, stay here. I'll be back in 10 minutes. "But, Sophie, I said stay here." Christine walked out without looking back. Her heels clicked down the hallway toward the elevator bank. Sophie watched her go. Then she was alone. The office felt bigger when it was empty. The shadows in the corners seemed darker. She tried to focus on her homework again, but her eyes kept drifting to the clock. 10:55 p.m., 10:58 p.m., 11 p.m. Somewhere down the hall, Daniel vacuumed a conference room. The sound was distant, almost comforting. Proof she wasn't completely alone. 11:03 p.m. Sophie set down her pencil. Her mother had said 10 minutes. 11:07 p.m. She stood and walked to the doorway, peering down the empty hallway. The elevator lights indicated one car was stopped on the parking garage level. The other sat idle on the lobby floor. Maybe her mom was just taking longer than expected. Maybe there was traffic in the garage. Maybe a sound. Faint, distant, like footsteps running. Sophie held her breath, listening. Nothing. She was imagining things. She went back to the couch. 11:12 p.m. Then she heard it. Clear and unmistakable. Her mother's voice, screaming. Raw. Terrified. The kind of scream that cuts through walls and floors and makes your blood stop moving. It came from the direction of the emergency stairwell. Not the elevators, the stairs. The scream cut off suddenly, like someone had covered her mother's mouth. Sophie was on her feet before she could think. She ran into the hallway, her heart hammering. The emergency exit sign glowed red at the end of the corridor. The door was propped open with a rubber wedge. That door was never propped open. She ran toward it, pushed through. The concrete stairwell was cold and harsh under fluorescent lights. Sophie looked down over the railing. One flight below. Her mother lay on the landing, motionless. Blood spread dark beneath her head. Her briefcase was open, contents scattered across the concrete. Papers, pens. Her phone, screen cracked. The two men in ski masks crouched over her. One was going through her purse. The other had his fingers on her neck, checking for a pulse. "She see our faces?" the first one muttered. "I don't know, man. I don't know." "Then we got a problem." Sophie's breath caught in her throat. She took one step back. A piece of gravel shifted under her shoe. Both men looked up. For half a second, their eyes met hers through the masks. Then Sophie ran. Sophie didn't scream. Every instinct told her to, but some deeper survival reflex kicked in instead. She backed away from the stairwell door, silent, then turned and ran. Her feet pounded down the hallway. The conference rooms blurred past. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps. Security. She needed security. But the desk was 3 floors down, the main lobby. She'd have to take the elevator, wait for it to arrive, ride it down while her mother bled out in the stairwell with 2 men standing over her. She didn't have time. Sophie's mind raced. Who else was in the building? Who could help? Then she remembered. The janitor. The kind man her mother had yelled at. The one who'd nodded at her earlier tonight. She ran toward the north wing. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Her expensive shoes slapped against the polished floor. She turned a corner, nearly slipping, caught herself on the wall. There, the conference room at the end of the hall. The door was open. A cleaning cart sat outside. Sophie burst through the doorway. Daniel was emptying a trash bin. He looked up, startled. Sophie ran straight to him, grabbed his coveralls with both hands. The words came out in a broken, sobbing rush. "See, they beat my mom in the stairs. She's dying. There's blood everywhere. Please, you have to help her." Daniel went very still. For 3 full seconds, he didn't move. His face was blank. His eyes were somewhere else, seeing something Sophie couldn't see. Sophie's fingers tightened on the fabric of his uniform. "Please!" Daniel's jaw locked. His hands trembled. Every muscle in his body seemed to be pulling in 2 different directions at once. This was violence. This was exactly what he'd walked away from. This was the thing that had taken Renee and their son while he was 8,000 miles away, powerless to stop it. Every instinct screamed at him, "Call 911. Get this child to safety. Stay invisible. Don't go near it. Don't touch it. Don't let it pull you back into that world." Then he looked at Sophie's face. 8 years old. Terrified. A desperate. The same age Renee had been pregnant with when she died. Something shifted behind his eyes. The paralysis broke. Daniel crouched down to Sophie's level. His voice was quiet, but absolutely steady. "Listen to me. I need you to run to the security desk downstairs. Tell them to call police and ambulance. Tell them 40th floor, emergency stairwell. Can you do that?" Sophie's eyes were wide, wet with tears. "But my mom, I've got her, I promise. She's hurt really bad, and those men—" "Sophie," his voice deepened, "I've got her, but I need you safe. Run to security. Stay there. Don't come back up. Understand?" She hesitated. Her whole body was shaking. She was terrified to leave her mother, terrified to trust this stranger her mother had treated so cruelly. But something in his voice made her believe him. "Okay. Go." "And now!" Sophie ran. Daniel stood. He walked to his cleaning cart and pulled out his phone. Dialed 911. Put it to his ear as he moved toward the hallway. "Ashford Global Consulting, 40th floor, emergency stairwell. 2 armed suspects, 1 victim down with head trauma. Ambulance and police needed immediately." He hung up before the dispatcher could respond. Then he moved toward the stairwell. His footsteps were silent on the carpet. His breathing was controlled, measured. Something in his gait changed. Something in the way he held his shoulders. For 8 years, Daniel Cross had been a ghost, a shadow, a man who cleaned floors and emptied trash bins and disappeared into hallways where no one looked twice. That man was gone. The emergency exit door was still propped open. Daniel slipped through it without a sound, and the concrete stairwell was harsh under fluorescent light. One flight down, he could see the landing. Christine Harlow lay motionless. Blood pooled dark beneath her head. 2 men in ski masks stood over her. One was going through her purse. The other was crouched beside her, checking her neck for a pulse. Neither had heard him coming. Daniel descended the stairs like smoke, silent, controlled, inevitable. 8 years of trying to forget who he'd been. 8 years of running from the violence that had destroyed his family. 8 years of choosing invisibility over action. All of it gone in the space between one breath and the next. He reached the landing. The men still hadn't seen him. Daniel didn't announce himself. He just moved. Daniel's eyes tracked everything in 2 seconds. Christine lay motionless on the concrete landing. Blood pooled dark beneath her head. Her breathing was shallow, irregular. Depressed skull fracture, going into shock. 2 men in ski masks stood over her. The one on the left held her watch and necklace. The one on the right had 2 fingers pressed to her neck, checking for a pulse. Neither had heard Daniel coming. He moved. The first attacker never saw it. Daniel's arm locked around his throat from behind, cutting off blood flow to the brain. A rear naked choke, executed with the kind of precision that only comes from doing it 1,000 times. The man's hands flew up, clawing uselessly. 8 seconds. His body went limp. Daniel lowered him silently to the ground. The second attacker spun around. His eyes went wide behind the mask. His partner was down. A janitor in coveralls stood where his partner had been a moment ago, and he pulled a knife from his jacket. "Stay back!" His hand was shaking. Panic made him sloppy. Daniel closed the distance before the man could process what was happening. His left hand redirected the knife thrust. His right hand locked the attacker's wrist, twisted. The weapon clattered to the concrete. Daniel swept the man's leg. He went down hard, face first onto the landing. Daniel's knee dropped onto the man's spine, pinning him. The attacker tried to buck him off, couldn't. With his free hand, Daniel reached for Christine. He checked her airway first, clear. Then her head position. He stabilized her skull with his palm, fingers spread to prevent any movement that could worsen spinal damage. The scalp wound was bleeding heavily. He stripped off his work shirt, folded it. Applied pressure with his forearm while maintaining head stabilization. The pinned attacker screamed, "Get off me! I'll kill you! I'll—" Daniel's voice cut through the noise. Calm, steady, absolute. "Stop moving, or I'll put you to sleep like your friend." The man went still. Daniel's hand stayed on Christine's head. His other arm pressed the makeshift bandage against her scalp. He counted her respirations, checked her pulse at the carotid. Weak, but present. "Stay with me," he murmured. The same voice he'd used on soldiers in Helmand Province, when they were bleeding out in the back of a Humvee. Calm, present. "You're going to be okay. Help's coming." Footsteps pounded up the stairwell. 2 security guards burst through the door, radios crackling. They stopped short, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The one unconscious man on the ground. One pinned and immobile. A janitor performing first aid on Christine Harlow with one hand, while restraining an attacker with the other. "Police and ambulance are 2 minutes out," the first guard said. Daniel didn't look up. She's got a depressed skull fracture. Tell the paramedics to bring a cervical collar and backboard. Possible spinal involvement. The guard relayed the information into his radio. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. The police arrived first. 3 officers, hands on their weapons, assessing the scene with trained caution. One of them cuffed the unconscious attacker. Another took over restraining the second man, allowing Daniel to use both hands on Christine. The paramedics came 90 seconds later. 2 of them moving fast with their equipment. Daniel didn't move until they were beside him. Depressed skull fracture, left parietal region, shallow respirations, thready pulse. I've been maintaining cervical stabilization for 3 minutes. No spinal movement. The lead paramedic knelt beside him. He was older, maybe 50, with salt and pepper hair and the efficient movements of someone who'd done this job for decades. He looked at Daniel's hand position, looked at the makeshift pressure bandage, looked at Christine's stable head position despite the chaos around her. Then he looked at Daniel's face. "You're military." Daniel said nothing. "Ranger medic?" Daniel's hands didn't stop moving. He helped them slide the backboard into position, guided Christine's head onto the cervical collar with the same careful precision he'd maintained for the last 4 minutes. The paramedic watched him work. Recognition dawned in his eyes. "You saved her life, you know that? Another 5 minutes and she'd have been gone." Daniel stepped back as they secured Christine to the gurney. A detective approached. 40-something, tired eyes, cheap suit. He had a notepad out. "I'm going to need a statement." Daniel nodded. Behind him, the 2 attackers were being led away in handcuffs. The conscious one was still shouting threats. The unconscious one was coming to, groggy and confused. The paramedics wheeled Christine toward the ambulance. The lead paramedic glanced back at Daniel one more time, something like respect in his expression. The detective was still waiting. "Start from the beginning. Who are you, and what happened here?" Daniel's jaw tightened. He'd spent 8 years being invisible, but 8 years making sure no one asked questions. 8 years keeping his past buried. All of it was about to come undone. The detective's pen was poised over his notepad. His eyes were sharp, patient. "Sir? I asked who you are." Daniel looked at him for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "My name is Daniel Cross." The hospital waiting room smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. Sophie sat in a plastic chair, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes red and swollen. She hadn't moved in 2 hours. Christine was in the ICU stable, unconscious, alive. The automatic doors slid open. Sophie's head snapped up. Daniel walked in with Maya beside him. The little girl's hand was tight in her father's. Sophie ran. She crashed into Daniel, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. He knelt down and wrapped his arms around her, a steady and solid. Maya joined the hug without a word, her small arms circling both of them. "She's okay," Daniel said quietly. "Your mom's going to be okay." Sophie pulled back, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "You saved her. The police said you saved her." Daniel didn't respond. He just held her gaze, calm and present. "Thank you," Sophie whispered. While they waited, the story began to unfold. Security had reviewed the footage. Every angle, every second, the attack. Sophie's desperate run. Daniel's intervention. What they saw made the guards go silent. An investigative reporter named Sarah Chen got the tip from a hospital source. She started digging, made a few calls, found Daniel's military file buried in public records. By sunrise, the story was everywhere. Janitor who saved CEO is decorated war. Hero she publicly mocked. A Sergeant Daniel Cross, 75th Ranger Regiment. 3 combat deployments, dozens of commendations, Bronze Star with Valor, Combat Medical Badge, the medic who'd kept men alive in Kandahar when everyone else said they were already gone. The same man Christine Harlow had called barely employable in a marble lobby 2 weeks earlier. The attackers were identified by noon: Marcus Torres and David Kim, former Ashford mailroom employees. Christine had fired them 7 months ago after a public confrontation where she'd questioned their intelligence and work ethic in front of their colleagues. They'd been planning revenge ever since. 2 days later, Christine woke up. Sophie was beside her bed. She wouldn't let anyone else tell the story. Her voice was small but steady as she explained what had happened. The men, the blood, running to find Daniel, and the way he'd promised to save her mom, and then kept that promise. Christine's eyes filled with tears. She asked to see the footage. The nurse wheeled in a laptop. Christine watched in silence. Watched Daniel move through that stairwell like a man who'd done this 1,000 times before. Watched him neutralize 2 armed men and save her life with the kind of precision that only comes from years of training and sacrifice. When it finished, she closed her eyes. "I need to speak with him." Daniel visited that afternoon. He stood in the doorway of her hospital room, hands in his pockets, waiting. Christine's voice was hoarse. "I don't know how to apologize for what I said to you." "You don't need to. I called you incompetent. I tried to get you fired. I treated you like you were nothing." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "So you were wrong about who I am. But I was wrong too." "About what?" "I spent 8 years trying to disappear, trying to make sure no one ever needed me for anything that mattered. Your daughter needed me, and I almost said no." Christine's jaw tightened. She looked at her hands. "Why did you help me?" "Because your daughter asked me to, and because it was the right thing to do." The words hung in the air between them. Simple. True. 1 week later, Ashford's board called an emergency meeting. The optics were catastrophic. Their COO had been targeted by employees she'd abused, saved by a custodian she'd publicly humiliated. The story was everywhere. Investors were asking questions. HR had received a flood of complaints from current and former employees detailing a pattern of behavior that made the company liable. Christine was placed on indefinite leave. An internal review was launched. 3 weeks later, she was quietly demoted to a consulting role with no direct reports. She didn't fight it. 6 months passed. The Renee Cross Center for Tactical Medicine occupied a converted warehouse on the south side. Bright, open, filled with training equipment and the sound of focused work. Daniel stood at the front of a classroom, teaching a group of corporate professionals the basics of emergency response. His voice was calm, patient. He demonstrated CPR technique, walked them through triage decisions, explained how to stabilize someone until help arrived. In the observation room above, 2 girls sat side by side, watching through the glass. Maya and Sophie, inseparable now. Maya was explaining something about her dad's teaching style. Sophie listened, she nodding, her face more relaxed than it had been in years. Christine sat in the back of the observation room, taking notes. She volunteered at the center twice a week, helping teach basic first aid to people who'd never thought they'd need it. It was humbling work, necessary work. She was learning to be the mother Sophie had always needed. That evening, Daniel and Maya drove to Graceland Cemetery. The air was warm, the light golden. They walked together to Renee's grave. Daniel knelt down, ran his hand across the headstone. Maya stood beside him, quiet. "I did it," he said softly. "I finally used my hands to protect someone again." The wind moved through the trees, and this time I didn't fail. Maya slipped her hand into his. They stayed there for a long time, father and daughter, surrounded by the gentle sounds of evening. See, later that week, Daniel returned to the center. A new class was starting. He stood at the front of the room, waiting for the students to settle. Through the observation window, Maya and Sophie waved at him. He nodded back, a small smile on his face. Then he began to teach. Because the measure of a person is not their power or position. It's not the title on their door or the size of their paycheck. It's not whether they've been seen or overlooked, praised or humiliated. The measure of a person is their willingness to use their gifts to protect others, even those who have wronged them, even when it costs them their peace, even when the world has given them every reason to walk away. The measure of a person is what they do when someone asks for help, and no one would blame them for saying no. Daniel Cross had spent 8 years trying to disappear, trying to become invisible, trying to make sure no one ever needed the part of him that had failed the people he loved most. But a frightened child had run to him in the dark and asked him to be brave, and he had answered. That was the measure of the man. In the observation room, 2 little girls watched their fathers, one who had learned to save lives, one who had learned to be present, and saw the future they were building together. Peace earned through pain. Hope built on the ruins of grief. And the quiet knowledge that sometimes the people we overlook are the ones with the most to give.